Today is Tuesday, July 14th, 2009. My name is Frieda Reitman, and it's my pleasure today to interview Lee Fanwick at her home in Stamford as part of the Oral History Archive of the Jewish Historical Society of Lower Fairfield County. I have been looking forward to this day.
You want to mention me?
The person recording this is Gail G. Trell. Lee.
Yes.
I looked over what you submitted, and I think we ought to start at the beginning and talk a little about your family, mother, father, where they came from, where they went to. Would you start there?
My father came to this country about 1902. All of his family were in western Pennsylvania. What got him to Pennsylvania, why? I guess that's why, because his family were there.
And where did he come from?
He came from Romania, Duraban, Romania. He had 6 brothers and 1 half-sister. He was next to the youngest, before the half-sister. My mother came from Galicia, which was probably part of the Austro-Hungarian Empire. She came as a teenager with her brother. My mother came to New York City and lived with an aunt and probably worked in a Triangle shirt factory, I would think, or some sweatshop like it, because she earned $5 a week, and out of that $5 she had to pay her aunt rent and clean her house for her besides. So when my father came to New York, he was supposed to have a shidduch. A shidduch is an arranged marriage, and evidently when he saw the shidduch, he wasn't so pleased. Somehow he met my mother. And he had proposed to her, and within 3 weeks they were married. He took her back to Trell, Pennsylvania, and my mother, who had worked in the garment industry, came with fancy clothes from New York City. She was a big city lady at 18. My mother describes Trell, Pennsylvania at that time as the mud up to your knees.
Okay.
So when she would walk down the street, she said people would look out the window to see what she was wearing. My father didn't have much education, but evidently he was quite an entrepreneur. I just found this story out recently about him, that he was a peddler. And going among the different farmers to sell whatever he was selling, they said to him, do you know someone wants to buy a cow? Do you know someone wants to buy a pig? And from that, evidently, his business developed, because my father was in the wholesale meat business. We had a farm of 60 acres with a slaughterhouse. And
where is Farrell?
Farrell, Pennsylvania is on the Ohio border, near Youngstown, Ohio.
Okay.
It used to take us all day to get there.
That was a steel.
There was Westinghouse, Sharon Steel, Malibu Steel.
Okay.
That was the industry
in Youngstown.
Youngstown Steel, Carnegie Steel.
And you were an hour away by walking. How did you get around to Youngstown if you wanted to go?
How did we get around? There was a bus system. Before that, there were streetcars. My father drove a truck, he drove a car. For a man without any education, he pulled himself up by the bootstraps, and he really was a very industrious man.
And he had a big family. I was amazed to see
Yes,
how
we
many
did.
siblings you
We had, my oldest brother probably died of crib disease when he was 6 months old. And then I had 3 brothers and 2 sisters. And we were a very observant family. There was one Orthodox shul in town, in Farrell, the next town, which was divided by what they called Division Street, was Sharon, Pennsylvania. They were the rich Jews. We were the poor Jews. They kind of looked down on us, but that was the fancier Jews lived in Sharon. In fact, the Jacob Rosenblum that Erwin talks about is from Sharon, Pennsylvania.
And you said, tell us a little about the Jewish community there.
Well, it was in the beginning, there was a Romanian shul and a Hungarian shul. But later they merged into one. And my father had, besides a farm, and he had 2 stores, 2 grocery stores. And during the Depression, everybody was on credit, and right next to us was a small A&P, not the A&P you see today. So when they had money, they went into the A&P, and when they didn't, they came to my father's store and charged it. So most of them paid their bills by the end of the week when they got paid. But I'm sure there are people who still owe us money to this day.
Well, that was a different upbringing.
Yeah, it was as I said, we were a very close family, very observant, very a good upbringing, with very, very close, good moral upbringing.
And you had other family there,
Oh,
right?
yeah. I had, my father had 2 brothers there, 3 brothers who lived in the valley, what we call Chenango Valley. There were,
All farmers?
no, my father did have a farm, which was a little bit in the outskirts. But in town, there were department stores. It was a small town, very well contained, with a movie theater, ice cream parlors, a high school, everything you might want. Growing up in Farrell and Chenango Valley was a good upbringing. There was a Hadassah. There was a...
So that goes back a long way for you.
That's right. There was a Hadassah. There was a synagogue. There was as a child, I belonged to Young Judea. And we used to meet Sunday afternoon with 5 cents worth of dues.
And did you go to public school?
Oh yeah, I went to public school. There was no such thing as, we had a cheder, or a Hebrew school, after school, and you went every day after school. You went in the summertime. There was no time off.
But there were Christians living there too.
Oh yeah, you knew that the Christians were here and the Jews were here, but in your class we were all mixed.
But at home, would you invite non-Jews to your home?
Oh yeah, I had, on our street there were Polish, there were Macedonians, there were blacks, there was everything. My best girlfriend was a block away from me. Her father was the kosher butcher in town.
Okay.
So there was everything. One of my best friends was a Spanish girl.
Did you visit New York ever when you
Oh,
were
sure.
young?
We did come to New York because my mother's family all lived here.
Okay.
So my father would drive all night because it was less traffic on 322. And my mother's whole family lived here. And my mother's brother was in the hotel business in South Fallsburg and in Lakewood.
Oh.
So that we used to come here in the summertime, and my mother's family lived in Newark. Newark, New Jersey.
So that was not as far out as I first thought. You were part of the bigger Jewish community, or you knew about it anyway.
Oh, yeah, we used, on a Sunday, my father would drive us to Pittsburgh because he had family in Pittsburgh. And in Pittsburgh, there was a kosher deli and kosher appetizing, and he had a cousin who was a kosher butcher. So on a Sunday, we would go to Pittsburgh, visit the family.
Are there any special childhood memories you want to record?
This one friend that I had, what I was closest with, I still see her. She lives in Akron today. She was 9 months older than me. And my mother used to call her the Alta Cup.
Okay, should we translate that?
Alta Cup means someone who thinks she's brilliant and she knows everything.
Okay, see, I wouldn't have put the think she's brilliant, but okay.
Well, that was my mother's
yeah.
description of the Alta Cup.
Okay.
And we would play. In the morning we would fight, and she'd run home. And then her mother would call me up and say, "Tilly, you got to make friends with Betty again."
Now, you called yourself Tilly there,
Yes.
so I think you should record a little bit
Okay.
about your name.
When I was born, my Yiddish name is Toba. And my mother wanted to name me Toby. And the doctor said the English name is Tilly. And my mother, he said, "You can't call me Tilly on the birth certificate because that's not a real name." So I ended up with the name Matilda, which I hated all my life. Then when I got to college, I became enlightened and I became Lee. And I'm officially Lee.
Okay, I wondered about that, Lee, but now I understand. Did you always know you were going to go to college?
No, I didn't. During the Depression, my brother went to college part-time, then he got called to the service, but he was much older. But when my sister graduated from high school, she decided she wasn't going to stay in Farrell, no way. She had to be someplace else. She had to spread her wings. So she said to my father, "I'm going to nursing school." My father said a Jewish girl does not carry bedpans. So she said to my father, can we afford it? He says, "We'll find the money somehow." So my sister went to college, and then when I graduated 4 years later, my father had already died. He was killed in an accident. And my brother came home from the service, and he said, "You're going to college too, there's no question about it." So that's how I ended up at Penn State, where I met my husband.
Okay, so we got a couple of things in there that's very interesting tidbits. When you went to college, what did you major in?
Did I major in? I ended up with an MRS.
That was the joke at that time about.
That's right.
Girls go to college for their MRS.
That's right. When I went to college, I really didn't have any real purpose in mind. I went to college to get an education. I took liberal arts. I didn't have a real purpose.
Did you like college?
Oh yeah.
Did you miss Farrell? Well,
No.
Penn State is sort of out in the boonies too.
Well, that was another story. In 1945, after the war was over, all the veterans were coming back. And my first year, I went to a state teachers college because they had no freshmen on campus. And things are beshert. Ernie went to Penn State, the ASTP program. And he applied to, he went to Syracuse, went to Penn State, and he said, where would he get fastest his degree? Penn State said they would admit him, but they wouldn't admit him for a year. So he went to China with Marshall for a year. He came back, and at that time I was a sophomore at Penn State. And he came back, and that's when we met, so things are beshert. Beshert means fate.
Right, and what year was that?
That was 1947.
So you've been together a very long time.
That's right.
Tell us a little when you got married and.
Well, after from Farrell, my father had died in the meantime. He was killed in an accident, and my mother decided we would move to the east where her family lived, in Newark. And Ernie was from Brooklyn. I wasn't going to let Ernie get away from me. I went to work for his father, who was in the insurance business.
Oh, okay.
And then he went on to law school from Penn State, which he will tell more about that. So.
And what did you do when he was in law
I was
school?
working for his father. I was working for his father in the insurance business.
And you were living where then?
In Newark. I was living in Newark at that time.
So you got married and lived in.
We got married in Newark.
Okay. And do you still have family in Farrell?
Yeah, there is family in Farrell yet. As a matter of fact, my parents are buried in Farrell, and there are more Jewish people in the cemetery than there are in the town now. My nephew still lives there. We got married in Newark.
So you were now close to his family,
Close to my mother's family.
close to your mother's family, and his family was in Brooklyn.
His family was in Brooklyn, that's
So,
right. Brighton Beach.
And what brought you to Stanford?
Ernie got his degree and became a lawyer. He had several jobs, but the job that brought us here, he worked for Burndy Corporation in Norwalk.
Okay.
So that's what brought us to Stanford.
And how did that compare as a Jewish community to the other places where you had lived?
Well, where I lived, we lived in Nutley first. We first got married. It was a small town also, with a small Jewish community, very nice.
That's New Jersey, right?
New Jersey, right, in Passaic. Also a nice little Jewish community, one synagogue where everybody belonged. And there I was again active in the sisterhood and Hadassah. I mean, this has been my life. I've been connected with a Jewish community. Two of my children were born in Passaic. I was always involved where there was a Jewish community. When I was growing up, we had a junior Hadassah. From Young Judea, I went to junior Hadassah.
And was there one in college when you went?
No. At college, I was active in Hillel. Again, because it was so many veterans, I didn't move immediately into the dormitory. We lived in housing, which was around the corner from Hillel. And that's where I met Ernie in Hillel.
Okay, and you were in New Jersey, you had two children in New Jersey. You want to tell us their names and when they were born?
Lewis was born in 1952. I was married in 51. He was born in 1952. L-E-W-I-S, Lewis. My daughter Leslie was born in 1955, also in Passaic. When Leslie was 6 months old, we moved up to Stanford. First we lived on Rolling Drive. We lived there 16 years. And we've been in this house 36 years.
Wow. And did you work outside the home while you had young kids?
No, that was something we didn't do. We stayed home, we took care of our children, we were active in Jewish affairs. But it was something that you just didn't do. You got married, you stayed home with the children.
Right, it was considered that your husband didn't make enough money if you had to go out to work.
Well, it's funny. When he graduated from law school, he made $4,800 a year. And the biggest thing was we should make $10,000 a year. But he worked 5.5 days to make $4,800. I mean, that was a lot of money in 1951.
Right.
But then we moved up to Stanford. Things improved a little bit.
And did you belong to the Orthodox?
When we came up to, when we came to Stanford, Agudath Shalom was on Grove Street at that time. And they had a couples club. We were young at one time. And they had late Friday night services. And I guess we'd always belonged to a conservative synagogue. We lived in Nutley. And we tried Bethel out first. And we found that that was just a little bit not to our liking. Rabbi Perlman was there at that time. And on a Shabbat, he said to my husband, "What do you do for a living?" My husband didn't say he was a lawyer, he said he was an engineer. With that, Rabbi Perlman turned around, made a 360-degree turn, and talked to somebody else. That didn't make us very happy with the conservative temple.
You didn't try the reform.
What?
You didn't try reform.
No, we didn't. Ernie came home from work and he said, "I heard Agudath Shalom has a very nice young rabbi." Rabbi Aaron Kranz was young then.
Okay.
So we tried Agudath Shalom, and Irvin Helen Knightlick, that's how long I know Irvin Knightlick, met us after at the Onei Shabbat, and they said, "You're new in town, aren't you?" And they said, "Welcome." And that was all we needed to join Agudath Shalom, because somebody said welcome to us.
I know you've been involved with a great many things in the community. Suppose you give us a little feeling about that, how it developed through the years. And
Well,
I noticed you said something about working.
When we came to Stanford, Stanford was still a sleepy little town. The Fifth Avenue was Bedford Street with a few fancy stores. There was Ridgeway. There was a shopping center, which is now just a little bit to the north of it. There was a shopping center there with a Hamburg Den, which everybody went to after a movie on a Saturday night. Or there was Lucy's, which is now the Court Street Diner. That was Lucy's. You went there after a movie on a Saturday night. We moved to Rollingwood Drive. There was a nice group of young Jewish families there, which we became very close and friendly with. And I'm still friendly with some of them today. We made a lot of friends with the Couples Club. Stanford was a very nice town in 1955, 1958. We moved here in 1957. It was pretty much a small in many ways. It was kind of very provincial, 1957.
Do you think it's different today?
Yes, it is.
What do you see as?
It's more small New York City. I still love Stanford, I wouldn't leave it, but it's not, you don't have that feeling that you know everybody. When we came here in 57, you felt as though you knew almost everybody.
And did your children go to public school?
Yes, we did. We went to, my children went to Newfield School,
And
and they could walk to Newfield School.
important point. Were they ever, did they ever come back with stories of anti-Semitism, or was it a very accepting community?
I don't think there was too much of it. When I grew up, there was a lot of it. When I grew up.
In Farrell?
In Farrell, there was a lot of it. I was told I killed Christ, which I didn't even know who he was. There was a lot of it when I was growing up. In fact, on Christmas, not to sing Christmas carols was a terrible thing. So you used to mouth the Christmas carols. I felt it growing up. When I came to Stanford, I didn't. Stanford, I think, in 1957, through the Rabbi Aaron Krantz had very good relations with a lot of the churches. And as a result, I think there wasn't a lot of it when we were in Stanford. Maybe there was, but it wasn't overt.
Okay. You know, this is, I think, important for the record. Tell us about the things that you were involved in. You
When I
mentioned
came
the
here,
temple, but there were other things too.
When I came here, we had Hadassah, the sisterhood. I didn't join sisterhood immediately because at that time sisterhood was an organization for old ladies. So I was active in Couples Club. Ernie eventually became president. Couples Club was very important at that time in my life, more so than even Hadassah. I didn't join Hadassah too much later, maybe 5 or 6, 7, 8 years later. I was more active in the synagogue.
Were you happy with the school system?
Oh yes, I was.
Do any of your children live in Stamford?
No, they don't. My daughter lives in Ardsley. My oldest son lives in Boston, outskirts of Boston. My youngest son lives in Wilton. His children went to bicultural day school.
Okay, so that's continuity.
Yeah. In many ways, I think my daughter-in-law is more observant than I am. She had a great influence of a Lubavitcher rabbi when she was in Nashville. So she's more observant in many ways than I am. Although all my children keep kosher, but she's even more so than I am.
Well, that's, again, nice feeling of continuity. So
Yeah.
Stanford was good in many ways for that.
Yeah.
What about the leisure activities besides the couples club?
Well, we also had the Newfield Swim Club. I think it still exists on Redbird Lane. A lot of our friends joined that. We joined the Jewish Center, which was on Prospect Street. Our kids went to the nursery school at the Jewish Center, the day camp at the Jewish Center. We were involved with that.
Did you ever go back to look at where your family came from?
Oh yes, I go back every year, what I call for a pilgrimage. Because my parents are buried in Farrell. I go back every year.
Is there still a Jewish community there?
A small Jewish community, maybe 50 families in the whole valley. My nephew still lives there with his family, with his wife. It's kind of a little bit of a vibrant community. Something interesting, even though my family belonged to an Orthodox synagogue, we didn't have many Jewish kids of my age in Farrell. They all lived in Sharon, which was the more affluent community. And my father would drive me every Sunday morning to Sunday school at the temple in Sharon, so I could meet the Jewish kids in Sharon. And I was the only one who was confirmed in my family, which was...
Meaning that was a Reform congregation?
It was conservative, leaning Reform, but it was mainly conservative. So that was something a little bit different. My father, who was very observant, felt that was important, that I should meet some Jewish kids at my own volition. Not that he said it was necessary, but there was something, was kind of an unwritten rule that you kind of stayed with your own. You looked for Jewish friends, even though I had some non-Jewish friends, but you looked for Jewish friends your age. And that was one way of meeting them.
It gives a very different view of the world than
That's
people
right.
who grew up in New York City or someplace like that.
Well, I think when you live in a small town, when there aren't so many Jews,
Go ahead.
my brothers didn't speak a word English till they got to school.
So Yiddish was their first language,
That's
but they
right.
were much older than you,
That's
so
right.
they were speaking English to you.
That's
But
right.
could you give us a little bit of the 4 questions in Yiddish?
Papa leven natuurlijk vragen 4 kasjes. De eerste kasje wordt te vragen, Shekholeros, I can't remember.
Okay, but you remember the Yiddish, the
Yeah.
Hebrew is, okay.
Tweede kasje wordt te vragen.
Great.
We were taught in Yiddish.
Right, by the rabbi.
No, by the
Shamus.
By the Shamus. We were taught. It was nothing very formal, but the girls were coddled more than the boys. But my father thought that we girls had to learn to read Hebrew as well as the boys. My father was very, very, education was important to him. And this was something that we had to do as well as the boys.
That was very unusual for his time,
Yes, it
actually.
was. My father was a very modern man. As I said, he was killed 2 weeks before I graduated from high school. He was killed in an accident. And, but he was a very modern man for a man born in Europe. It's very interesting. My brother, my oldest brother, married someone from Youngstown. All his friends went with Jewish girls from Youngstown. And when he was engaged, her grandfather insisted my brother read from a sitter to make sure he was Jewish.
He passed.
He passed, yes. As you want to talk about the farm?
Well, whatever you would like to talk about. I'm
Well-
happen to be interested in Jews on farms, which was not.
Well, my father wasn't when they bought the farm, probably,
But they lived elsewhere?
they lived in the farm very short, maybe about 5 years. And when my brothers had to go to school, they moved into Farrell. The farm was in West Middlesex, which was a little town that was all farm.
What did they grow?
They didn't grow anything. When they lived on the farm, they didn't grow anything. My father kept cattle there and pigs.
Okay, that's growing things.
Yeah, and we had a slaughterhouse. I'm not sure when he built the slaughterhouse, but as I said, he was in the wholesale meat business. He would take the shochet out to the farm, and he would slaughter the cattle. He would
So that he sold kosher meat then,
He sold kosher meat.
but he also sold non-kosher meat.
He sold the front quarter for non-kosher. And then after it was slaughtered, the rabbi would examine the innards to make sure that the animal was healthy. And if it wasn't healthy, then they would sell it for treif.
All right, so you have a lot of interesting experiences.
I would go with my father many times to go with them, watch with them. It was a beautiful farm with a stream in the middle. When my sisters were little, he bought a pony for them, kept it there. My father was a very indulgent man. My mother was the disciplinarian. But my father was a very indulgent man as far as the girls were concerned anyway.
Who did the cooking?
My mother did.
Was she a good cook?
My mother never got out of the kitchen because we were 6 children. You ate lunch at home because we came home from school for lunch because there were no kosher restaurants, so you never went out to eat. Occasionally we would go out maybe on Mother's Day, but you didn't go out to eat. It was a different kind of life. I mean, who thought of going out for dinner?
How much space between the oldest and youngest in your family?
My brother was 16 years older than I am, so he was like a second father to me. And my one brother who was still alive, who's 95. He was 14 years older. I had a brother who had Parkinson's disease, died when he was 30. My oldest sister was 8 years older than me. The next one was 4 years, and I was the youngest. And my oldest sister, who just recently died, she would say that Lee was everybody's little darling.
Okay. So you have happy memories of it being a very big family.
Yes, we were, Friday night was important, Shabbos was important, holidays were important.
So that you did not travel on Shabbat?
We did, because my father was in business. And the store was open on Shabbos. The store was open on holidays, even though he wasn't there. But at home, we were observant. Shabbos was Shabbos at home. Friday night was important.
Any other holidays that you spent a lot of time with? How was Pesach?
Pesach was Pesach. I can still remember one Pesach, when Gone with the Wind came out. I was in the 8th grade, and I was reading Gone with the Wind. And my mother wouldn't use the sink because the sink was chametz. So we would wash the dishes on the kitchen table with great big vats of hot water. And I was someplace hiding reading my book. And my mother used to say, "Come here and do get your head out of the book." Even then, I always had a book with me.
Now, you mentioned that your father didn't have a lot of education. What about your mother?
My mother didn't either. They had Jewish education. My father knew the Torah and the Talmud, and they knew how to daven. My mother had a prayer book that was in Hebrew and Yiddish.
Did she speak Yiddish?
My mother spoke Yiddish, yes.
And your father too?
They both, yeah, they did.
So you grew up listening to Yiddish?
Oh, I understand Yiddish, and I can speak it if I have to.
I understand that. But not everybody has that experience.
We had a very Jewish home.
But did you speak it to your children?
No, unfortunately, except for a few Yiddish phrases, we didn't. In some home where Yiddish was used to hide from the children, my parents spoke Yiddish to us, so we understood Yiddish, even though we ourselves didn't speak it. And my mother and father spoke English, knew English very well, but they were self-schooled.
Now, say on Pesach, did you have other family come, or was this
It was just
the eight of them?
our family we had a big Seder, and my father conducted the Seder, and with the white tablecloth. I can still remember the wine spilling on the white tablecloth.
And you asked the 4 questions.
I asked the 4 questions. I went to a Hebrew school where I learned the 4 questions in Hebrew and translated into Yiddish. My Hebrew teacher was the shamus in the shul. The shamus is the caretaker. He was the Hebrew school teacher.
It's a very strong ethnic Jewish home.
Yes, it was a very strong Jewish home, yeah.
And did you find it easy to do that in Stamford?
What?
Did you find you were able to do some of that in Stamford?
Oh, sure. For instance, in Farrell, we had 3 kosher bushers.
In Stamford, we don't.
In Stanford, we don't even have 1. But everybody kept kosher. If you didn't, it was a shanda. Or you hid. My sister-in-law, when he married my brother, went into one kosher butcher, and she said she wanted a pound of hamburger. He was appalled. He thought she was asking for ham. They called it chopped meat then.
Right.
It wasn't hamburger.
Right, it was chopped meat. Still is in the Jewish butchers.
That's right.
Are there any other things you'd like to reflect on?
Well, as I said, my father was an interesting man. And quite a businessman. For instance, before Thanksgiving, he would drive to West Virginia for a load of turkeys for Thanksgiving. We had a poultry store next to my brother's store. That was the kind of thing he did. He was...
What kind of store did your brother
He had a
have?
grocery store too, but we owned property there. And this was one of the stores there, was a poultry store next to my brother's store.
What did you think about living in New Jersey as compared to Connecticut?
Wherever I've lived, I've always been part of a community. I made sure I was part of a community. And when you get involved with a community, you meet people and you have a good life. And I've done that wherever I live. I get involved with people's lives.
How does your home differ from your mother's home?
Not much. Not much different. My mother kept kosher, I keep kosher. Except today it's easier to keep kosher than when my mother kept kosher. Much easier to keep kosher today. My daughter keeps kosher, my son keeps kosher. Much easier today.
Did you each have your own room?
No.
I mean, I'm sure there was some differences.
No. We didn't know that there were differences. When growing up, we had a 6-room house, which I guess would maybe, everybody lived in a house. There was no such thing as an apartment house. Everybody lived in houses, but we only had 1 bathroom. But yet, when my mother's relatives would come in the summertime to visit us, because they were coming from a big city to a country. We slept on the floor, or on a chair, or my mother always made room for as many people as you could, and my mother always cooked, and she said, add another cup to the soup and you have plenty to eat.
See, that is a big difference
That's right.
in lifestyle.
That's
really.
right. Everything was made from scratch. You couldn't go into a market and buy anything kosher. You had to make everything. My mother made challah Friday morning. She made challah. She made lakshan, noodles. She made stuffed cabbage. My mother made everything.
And where had she learned to cook since she was so young when she got married?
Well, I had my father's brother, who came to this country. He was married, and they had what I heard was a mansion before the crash of 1929. And then my father brought my mother to Trell, and my mother and father got married in their house. And this aunt of mine, who was about 5'2", and her husband was about 6 foot tall, she ruled the roost of the family and everybody else. And she taught my mother to cook. Even though my mother was a Galicianer, or from Middle Europe, Middle Poland, my aunt, who was Romanian also, taught my mother to cook. So my mother learned how to make mamaliga, which is yellow cornmeal.
I know, but that's Romanian or Italian.
It's now polenta. She gets fancy. But my mother learned how to cook for my aunt.
Because, that's what it used to happen, not like today, right?
No.
So there are some differences.
We had a great big round dining room table.
So did you help her cook, or did she do
No,
it
I
all by
never-
herself?
I just cleaned up. We were the chief cooks of all the washers, my sisters and I.
And the brothers took the garbage out?
God forbid. My brothers worked in the store with my father. But we girls we had to be in the kitchen. We cleaned, my mother cooked and we cleaned up. Even Friday night when we went to a football game, after the dishes waited for me till I came home from the football game. That was my mother's way of saying, you want to go to the football game, you have to clean up when you come home.
Okay, so she knew how to keep it going, huh?
My mother was a disciplinarian.
Are there things you'd like to show us in the house that we should include in the record?
Well,
Let me stop it.
Yeah.
because Hadassah was so much a part of my life here in Stanford and elsewhere, I was Woman of the Year, I was president,
Right, let's get,
so I've had all of these awards. This is Woman of the Year, this one is as president. I was a Hand of Healing honoree here. This is a National Leadership Award. And here I was active in Israeli bronze.
In what?
Israeli bronze. It was a founder's gift that Bree and I gave to Hadassah Hospital for stem cell research. All my children, sounds like a, and 9 of my grandchildren.
Well, I think it's been a wonderful opportunity to learn about where you and your family came from and how you lived, and thank you for giving us this wonderful record for the Jewish community.
Well, it's been I've had a beautiful life, and I hope I've been good influence to my children, and have done something, have taught them to do something good with their life.
Thank you.
Thank you.